first of all, you've reported for the BBC, Reuters, Al Jazeera, but your detention in Egypt actually made global headlines. That was like over 10 years ago, right? So how did that experience reshape your view about press freedom?
Yeah, so that happened back in 2013 when I was arrested. And what happened then was that I was working, as you said, for Al Jazeera, covering the unfolding political crisis in Egypt. We saw ongoing street protests between rival supporters. One group was supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood that had been ousted from power in a military coup a few months previously. And then there were the supporters of the military-backed government that were already in there. And we'd been doing what we thought was legitimate journalism, just reporting from both sides of the crisis. But the interim government had started accusing the Muslim Brotherhood of being involved in terrorism. What happened to us was a really visceral example of the way in which, as I said, government had used national security laws and laws around terrorism to lock up and to silence uncomfortable journalism. The more I looked at it, the more I realised that that trend had pretty much continued since 9/11 all the way through. And even today, we're seeing journalists imprisoned at record rates around the world.
Why is journalism being so vulnerable, even in countries like the US now?
Not just political attacks. I mean, the Trump administration has threatened to withdraw the broadcasting licenses of news organisations that are overly critical. But here's the thing, I think it's a real mistake to see journalism as a threat to democracy. Good journalism keeps the system functioning well. It keeps it honest. Good journalism is the reason that we have elections that operate. It's the reason that people learn about. It's the way that people learn about the policies of the various politicians that they're voting for. It's the way that we can make sure that the state exercises its power responsibly. It's the mechanism that actually keeps democracy functioning. And if we lose that, then we end up in autocratic and authoritarian states. And we know that when that happens, you end up with increase in corruption, you end up with increase in increasing abuses of human rights, you end up with hoarding of power, you end up with all sorts of things which are contrary to the functioning of a good, healthy democracy.
Right, and of the major threats facing journalism today, whether it's the political attacks, the disinformation campaigns, economic pressure, or even the increase of AI, which one do you see as the most dangerous?
I would say the financial threat to the industry, because it doesn't matter what else is going on. If we don't have the money, if we don't have the resources to invest in good journalism, then everything else falls apart. You can't even begin to address the question of AI. You can't push back on mis and disinformation, the loss of public trust, government pressure. It all boils down to the money. And I'm not saying that journalists need to be greedy. In fact, nobody becomes, I'm sure you'd understand, no one gets into this business for the money. It's a famously difficult industry to survive in. But without enough financial resources, you can't invest in the kind of investigative journalism that we need to be doing. You can't produce journalism that holds to the ethical lines when you're operating in an environment that privileges speed over accuracy, polemic over serious reporting, sober analysis over shouty commentary. And so if we have enough financial resources as an industry, we can stay professional, we can stay independent, we can stay neutral, we can stay aggressive, we can cover stories that are difficult, we can cover stories that are expensive, we can do the investigations that might not necessarily yield big stories. But from time to time we come up with ones that really need to be told. And so I think ultimately that's probably the single most important and most difficult threat.
Right, and looking ahead, how optimistic do you still feel about the future of journalism?
I think in the short term I'm quite worried. I mean, all the pressures that you just listed earlier, whether it's financial or political or legal, or technical. All of these seem to be working against good journalism. But I also, I take the long view. Ever since Grok painted the story of the bison hunt on the wall of a cave somewhere, we've needed people to record the world, the events of the world, and to help us make sense and understand the world that's going on around us. And I'm pretty confident that we will always need those people. We'll need the storytellers, the good journalists. And so I think there is a growing understanding that actually we need journalists who are operating with professionalism and integrity to help to give us a core of information that we can rely on to understand the world around us. And I think that's a positive sign.